Oh, look at the glory there. That is some beautiful coffee. Well, the coffee's flowing and it's time to get going. Hey, welcome back to Questions Over Coffee. My name's Kevin Smith. It's good to see you again. Want a cup of coffee? Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything that's coming up on Questions Over Coffee. If you have a comment or a question, leave it in the section below. We'll get to it just as fast as we can. Today's question comes from Ash Limerick. Ash writes, "What do I do when the preacher teaches something I strongly disagree with?" Ash, this is a great question, and I will tell you there are a number of cases where this happens. So today, what I'm going to do is just try to give you a couple of things because there are a number of things that a person can do when they disagree with the preacher or with somebody else when somebody else is saying or teaching something that they disagree with. The first thing we need to do is ask ourselves why we disagree, because sometimes it is a legitimate scriptural concern that the preacher is wrong about. Sometimes, though, it is an issue where I just don't want to change. I like what I'm doing. I like what I'm saying. I like what I'm believing. You could keep going with those if you'd like. Uh, and what the preacher is saying is just not going to fit what I want as my worldview or whatever the case is. So sometimes it is a heart issue. Along with that, we need to ask ourselves, is this a scriptural statement that we disagree with that the preacher is using? Or is it his opinion on what this passage means or how we should apply this particular passage or whatever the case is? Sometimes we jump the gun, so to speak, and get angry when the preacher is using an example. And, well, maybe the preacher didn't use it right. Maybe, though, it is something that offends us, and for reasons as simple as our background or things that have gone wrong in life or something like that. So is it scriptural or is it an opinion? Because if it's scriptural, man, we got to do something. If it is, on the other hand, opinion, maybe not. So that's the first thing. We need to ask ourselves some questions. But let's, for argument's sake here, say that it is scriptural differences as to what the text says and what the text teaches. So the first place we want to look is Matthew chapter 18. And let's consider verses 15 through 18 here. "If your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. If he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you, so that by the mouth of two or three witnesses every fact may be confirmed. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector." And then before we draw some conclusions, let's turn over to James chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. "Let not many of you become teachers, my brethren, knowing that as such we will incur a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well." Teaching is tough business. It really is, because we've got so many people in a classroom setting or in a preaching setting that have different backgrounds, different views on Scripture, different understandings, different levels of faith, and much more. So it is really a mixed bag. So if we see that the preacher is preaching something that is not scriptural, or if we simply think it might be scriptural but it turns out to be an opinion, let's say, we need to go to him and say, I did not understand this, or what did you mean by this, or hey, I've got a different view here, what's going on, things like that. Because as James says, a teacher has a much stricter judgment. So here's the deal. We need to make sure, because they're brethren, that we can help them to avoid sin, just like we should be seeking to avoid sin as well in the things we say, the things we do, and in our understanding of Scripture to be as pure and faultless as possible. So, go to that preacher and say, hey, help me out here. Explain this to me. Where did you get your information? Things like that. Sometimes it is a scriptural disagreement, and that's where it becomes somewhat sticky, or can become somewhat sticky. I have taken an issue that I have had with a preacher in the past to them, and basically the person's response was, that's what the church needed to hear. But the problem was, that's not what that passage that he used had anything to do with. He abused the Scripture, and when it was pointed out to him, like, this is not what this says, he basically said, I don't care. And that is certainly a sin. We need to be absolutely careful with the things that we teach, and we need to make sure that we are as close to the Word, as good to the Word, as respectful of the Word as we can be. In those cases where the preacher just will not listen, and it is in fact a scriptural issue, we might need to talk to the leadership in the congregation, go to the elders in private and say, hey, I disagree with this teaching here, and here's why, here's what Scripture says, and have them talk to the preacher. And in some cases, it might be necessary that we decide, I need to go and worship with a different congregation because I cannot reconcile these teachings, and I think it is a salvation type issue. In those cases, after all is said and done, we might simply need to go to a different congregation. There are a number of things that can be done in these situations, but it starts with talk to the preacher that's in question, because in some cases they use an example and they understand what they're trying to say, but it comes out wrong, or somebody simply understands it wrong, or things like that. And sometimes it's just a simple misunderstanding, but sometimes it's a lot more, and we need to make sure that we discern which one it truly is and respond appropriately. So I have a question for you. What can we do to make sure that we truly understand what the preacher is trying to say? Because like we just said, sometimes they know what they want to say and it just comes out wrong. What can we do to be sure that we understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to say? Leave me a comment in the section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything that's coming up on Questions Over Coffee. Thank you for our time together today. I look forward to the next time. Keep pressing forward.